Before get into any questions or anything, first and foremost, well wishes to Chris and his move. I certainly wish that Chris would still be our head coach, but I also understand the desire for a new challenge. Chris may end up being on a new sideline, but I mean, he's our all-time winningest coach, did a lot of great things here as a player, as an assistant coach, as a head coach, and I mean, at the end of the day, he's always going to be a Musketeer. Again, happy for Chris, and he's always welcome back in Cintas. I already asked him if he was interested in a home and home, but he said maybe a little too soon for that. But as we've talked it through the last couple of days, again, wish him only the best going forward. So, looking forward from a process standpoint, we're certainly organized, prepared to do the search. I'm going to talk about things kind of in distinct categories, but at the end of the day, when you get something this fast moving, the reality is some of this is going to merge together. You'd like to spend a little bit of time here essentially making what I would call landscape calls, talking to people in the industry and getting a sense of thoughts about the program, gauging interest, and then also talking about candidates, vetting candidates. At some point you move from that canvassing or landscape process into what I would obviously characterize talking to candidates. And again, I'm not sure there's always a distinct start, stop, but that essentially is the process that we'll get started here immediately. Small group of people from within the athletic department, outside the athletic department, will be a part of the search, and then also, anytime you do something like this, clearly you want a kitchen cabinet around you. People that are industry experts and know our program, and I'm going to rely on those people, quite a bit over the next few days. And obviously, Father Graham will get to weigh in, and others here at the university. From a priority standpoint, clearly we want to find the best coach for Xavier basketball. And that's what I told the team, that's what I told the staff, and I would tell anybody, we want the best head coach for Xavier men's basketball. If you said what are the characteristics or the priorities, I'm sure we've got some job description over in HR, but it always boils down to, I think with any of our head coaches, one of the phrases I use a fair amount is I view the head coach as the CEO of our program. And that's real. Our head coach is so involved in every facet, the way Chris was, every facet of the program, and helps manage the program from that standpoint. It's not just X's and O's, but it's the total program, and so you're wanting somebody who, again, can view himself or herself as a CEO of a program, not just a head coach for any of our 18 sports. Under that, the priority is our student athletes. And first and foremost. And from a student-athlete development standpoint, that's not just a player standpoint, what they're doing as players, but also as people in developing themselves during their 4 years. Because there's probably no person who's more influential in the lives of our student-athletes than these head coaches. So that's going to be a priority. And obviously the lifeblood of college athletics is recruiting. And so who can demonstrate, and they put together what I would call a great plan to help keep this program where it is in the top echelon of college basketball. A couple of other topics that I'll throw out and try to answer questions before you ask them. Timeline, I can't be specific about a timeline. We want to get the best coach, and that's what's going to dictate the timeline. So is it a week or two or longer? I can't say. At the end of the day, the timeline will take care of itself as we work through that. I've already been asked about search firms, whether or not we'll use one. Nothing is set or in place today. I'll say I'm pretty popular with them right now, based on the phone calls that I've received. I'll also say I do think that the environment's changed a little bit in our business, from the last time Xavier went through this 10 years ago, and it probably gives you pause that we've got an industry that, where the FBI is involved with our industry, so that ability to vet candidates is really important, and so having a third party in some semblance or some sort, again, haven't finalized anything, but thinking about it. Candidates, I think you understand whether or not anyone asks. I'm not going to talk about any specific candidates tonight in any way, shape, or form. Doesn't make sense for me to talk about either internal candidates or external candidates. At the end of the day, we're going to canvass the industry and try to find the best head coach we can. Compensation, I've been asked about that. Safe to say, I mean, we are very competitive within the Big East and national landscape when it comes to compensation. The midpoint or average in our league is around $2 million a year for men's basketball. Chris was north of that and understood it would have been north of that had he ended up staying. But it's not going to make any sense for me to get into any specific numbers. Certainly not be beneficial. Chris and I met with the team at about 3 o'clock, a little after 3 o'clock this afternoon. Chris talked with them, and then I went through kind of this process, talked through some of these same things with the players, and I would characterize that as, look, they were disappointed. They're losing their head coach, and I think that's human. That's understandable. But they were great. They had a few questions, talking about the process. I asked for their input. Not so much on specific people, but the characteristics, of what they thought was important. And that dialogue started after Chris left, and will probably continue over the next couple of days. Still have not called our recruits. I will be handling that, trying to take care of that tonight. And those are the things I wanted to cover. I'd be happy to, as Tom said, take a question or two, and it looks like Patrick somehow wrestled the microphone away from everybody else, so does that mean you're first?
I guess so, yeah. As far as Chris's departure, did Xavier's athletic department, did you have a chance to match or put some kind of a competitive offer into the process in the event that he might have considered it for the possibility of staying, obviously?
I guess I don't want to characterize specific conversations we had. I don't think it does any, it's not useful to get into that at this point. Chris knew where we stood, very early in this process, and absolutely we wanted him to stay, and made every effort to try to get him to stay. So from that standpoint, matching, we never got to that point. We let Chris know early in the process, where he would be financially, and then, as we always do, we're talking through gaps in the program and how to address those if they exist. And again, really, I think useful conversation around that. Is that responsive to what you were trying to get?
Yeah.
Without giving you the number?
Yeah. Well, I guess then the other part of the conversation was, did you get from him that there was a genuine interest in considering staying here? Was this more about his desire to pursue a new opportunity?
I think those are, you probably ought to ask Chris that. So that would, yeah, I think that's a fair question for Chris.
You did cover some of the things that I wanted to touch on, and I'm sure others, but could you confirm the status of some of the assistants, some of the other staffers that are involved with the program? Longtime names like Mario Mercurio come to mind. Are you able to update us on their status at this time?
Honestly, I'm not. You probably ought to ask them, because we literally went from meeting with the team to talking a little bit further with the team to talking with some of our staff members. But I would expect, I expect to be talking with some of those staff members tonight.
And you don't want to talk about specific names for obvious reasons in the hiring process. Could you characterize the response you've had already to the opening, the vacancy?
I haven't looked at my phone since 3 o'clock, so.
In generalities again, but when you look for this next person to occupy that position, is it important for that person to have Xavier ties?
I think you want the best head coach we can find. And I know, I'm not trying to be coy, I'm not trying to be evasive. I think that's an ingredient. I think you got to gauge Xavier ties along with all the other ingredients that go into making this kind of a hire. So is it a factor? Yes. Is it the most important factor? I don't know. That's where we have to assess that as we talk to these candidates.
It looked like some of the players were coming up to your office after the first meeting. Do you want to share what you guys talked about? I mean, are they having concerns about just who would be in place?
No, again, I asked them in the locker room. The meeting with Chris took place in the locker room, where most team meetings took place. And I after Chris left, I kind of framed how I wanted some input from them. Told them they were welcome to pop up to my office, that I had a pretty quick window if they wanted to talk further then, or if they wanted to think further. And so they popped up, and we talked for about 10 minutes, and then I think one or two of them are probably going to get back to me a little bit later.
Greg, anybody who pays attention to Xavier basketball could kind of see this coming for a long time. At least the flirtation with U of L. How long have you been preparing for this moment that you weren't surprised or blindsided?
I think when you come to Xavier, and again, we've had such a great track record over 3 or 4 decades. It comes with the territory. So you're always prepared to some degree, but otherwise, I would say, let's face it, I don't think I've been here quite 5 years, but it is an annual rite of spring to go through this. So at least at Xavier it is. So that's a long-winded way of saying, yeah, you better be ready for this. Or
Greg,
as ready as you can be, Joe.
I've heard that idea passed around seriously and jokingly that it is an annual rite of spring, and it does seem to come up, and it seemed to come up with Chris over the last couple of years. Do you accept that for this athletic department, and would you not like to prevent that from being the case?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this program is beyond, any one player, any one coach, any one president. At the end of the day, this program has been built by over 4 decades, really, with great coaches, great players, great administrators who have helped build it to where it is. So I would hope a program transcends any one single person. Now, our all-time winningest coach is really important. It was a big part of that, and he deserves a lot of credit, both as a player, an assistant, and head coach. So again, we wish him the best as he moves forward.
Are you excited about this opportunity for yourself? You get to kind of make your, yeah.
Probably not the first word that I would come with, but
what would be the first word?
At the end of the day, Pat, I think you have to be prepared going into this process and be prepared for this moment anytime you're in college athletics with head coaches. And so I'd like to think that we're prepared, and we'll get after it and find the best person for Xavier.
There's this always idea that, like you said, an annual rite of spring, that you always had prepared for this to come. There's always this idea that an AD has a list of names that he's going to go to. But how much has that list, if you do have one, evolved in your 5 years here at Xavier, where some names maybe, without speaking specifically to candidates, but has that list evolved in your time here?
Absolutely. Because again, over a 5-year period, there are coaches who are successful and get hired at other places. There are coaches who aren't as successful. There are new coaches that you get to meet and you're introduced to and have the chance to get to know. So yes, that's always a moving target, or a list that's in constant fluid.
I know you said that Xavier ties is an ingredient, and this didn't really come as a big surprise because there had been a lot of discussion about him going to Louisville. So, I mean, do you think potentially that next head coach is in the building already?
Maybe. Again, I think.
But you've been thinking about it. It's been out there for a while.
The fact that
he may leave.
Right. So your question.
My question is, this has been something that's been bandied about for quite some time. So, have you heard from interest from coaches already in the building, or?
I haven't heard interest from any coaches yet. So, I mean, at the end of the day, but I've been busy for the last 3 hours. So, yeah, we definitely want, over the next, couple days, are going to get into that process and start talking to candidates.
Yeah. We'll take one more, and then I think he's got a few phone calls he still needs to make.
Do you anticipate one thing that maybe that has happened, that did happen potentially? I guess it's an allegation, but the Edmund Sumner situation. Do you anticipate having to address that throughout the hiring process, and how will you address that during the hiring process?
I would expect that most, if not all, candidates would probably ask Xavier's status, either known or unknown, all things tied to that, and the answer we've got is, again, we feel how we run this program is more important than the results on the court. That's really important to this university. Basketball and athletics are the front porch, so the way in which we run the program, I mean, that's real. It's not just lip service. So feel very comfortable in the answers we'll be able to provide candidates in that scope.